And then, if you've done the financial model, a lot of people actually forget to put in actually how much money they need if they are raising money. And what it's needed for, because people have a habit, if they're going to give you money, of wanting to know what you're going to spend it on and why it's important. And if it's just going to go on your salary, that tends not to be a great reason for people to give you money. And it tends to come in stages. So identify what the milestones are along the way that are going to mean that you're going to need chunks of money at important stages of the business. It's about demonstrating that you understand your own business, because that is very attractive. And the form, which we don't really have time for, but I can take questions at the end, about the difference between debt in a business and equity. Debt is good. Debt tends to get the managers up in the morning. Interest can be offset against tax, as dividends cannot. And generally, it will help to gear up the business and put as much debt as possible into it. Shareholders will be very keen on that because it will maximize their return, but at the same time, it puts risk into the business because debt has to be repaid, debt has to be serviced. Therefore, there's a balance to be had between the two forms of finance. We talked at the beginning about exit. And anybody who's read a book on business plan writing will write in this section, exit in 3 years by trade, sale or IPO. Well, it doesn't quite work, I'm afraid. And I've seen it so often before. Because IPO, does anybody not know what an IPO is? Initial public offering is a flotation of the company on the public market. Is not an exit route by and large. You're very unlikely to be able to take any money out at that stage. It tends to be a means of financing, a means of putting money into the business. Generally, for all these purposes, the exit route will be a trade sale to a larger company, probably in the same field, and therefore you need to identify what sort of big company are you going to irritate sufficiently that they will buy you rather than competing with you. And it's frequently the case that big companies want to do that. I have no problem with a business plan that says it's going to compete with a large company, particularly in the pharmaceutical industry now, where their pipelines of products are coming to an end, and they will buy research companies rather than having to do the research, the very expensive research themselves. They will pay a great deal of money for a company that has identified a market opportunity and created a product to fill it. So identifying who that big company is and perhaps operating the business in a way that is going to work towards that exit demonstrates that you understand what you're doing. We come to the risks. And it's very easy to be trivial about this section. The risks in a business can be terribly trivial. So, you can create a table, I've seen it often enough in books, which say risk and how we're going to mitigate that risk. We don't make enough sales, so we're going to take on another salesman. These are very trivial answers to trivial questions. What really matters, what's the biggest risk in an early stage entrepreneurial business?
Cash flow.
I think there's a bigger risk.
Health.
Health of what?
The entrepreneur.
Health of the entrepreneur. What happens, it may not be of any worry to you what happens when you go under a bus. It may not be your biggest worry. But if you have other stakeholders in the business who are going to be reading the business plan, it's one of the biggest risks that they would like to see how you're going to deal with it. What is the way that you deal with that?
Insurance.
One of the ways you can deal with it is insurance. And many of the biggest risks in a business can be insured against. So if you're running a food business, one of the biggest risks is that you have a food scare and you're shut down by health and safety straight away. Just like that, you're out of business. If you're running a childcare business and you drop a child on its head, you're out of business straight away. There are big, big risks, and how are you going to deal with those risks? And sometimes they can be dealt with by insurance. Some of the companies which I have invested in I have frequently been told that I would make a great deal more money if the entrepreneur did go under a bus and we were able to collect on the insurance, but actually it's not a good way to write a business plan. But you need to think through these areas of risk, not just trivial risk, but the really serious risks that are going to scupper your business. If you lose the data is another one, which tends to be one of the biggest risks in a business, that you have identified. Investors are in the risk business. They don't expect a risk-free investment. They don't expect a risk-free business plan. What they want is that you identify and you spoon feed so that they can take a calculated decision on those risks and how you have mitigated them.